This is your host, Dub FFG, Fantasy Football GOAT Strategies. How's it going today? Today, or this week, we're talking about Week 17, the championship round. Are you ready? Hope so. Let's get to it. First up, we're looking at Jordan Love. Now, Jordan is playing against the Vikings on Sunday night, so this should be a good scoring fest because they're playing indoors and this is a good rivalry. So, Packers, the Vikings, good skill players, and good fantasy numbers. Put Jordan Love in the game if you haven't. Next, we're looking at Patrick Mahomes. Now, Patrick is playing the Bengals. Yes, those Bengals without Joe Burrow, but somewhat of a rivalry because Pat's record against the Bengals since Joe's been there hasn't been too good. But the Bengals are 22nd versus the quarterbacks, and Joe's not playing. And also, keep in mind, this is a redemption game for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Why? Because the Raiders, they dismantled them last week. So the Chiefs need to come out and show some life and show that they still have a superior team and a superior mindset. Pat Mahomes, put him in a game. He can take you to a championship. Next up, we're looking at Kyren Williams. Now, Kyren and the Rams, they're playing the Giants. They're traveling to play the Giants. The Giants are 22nd versus the running backs. This is an East Coast game in New Jersey, 1 o'clock. That's the only concern we really have for this, is that the Rams' body clock will be slightly off in that first half. So the game should be slow for the Rams in the first half, but they should pick it up in the second half, and Kyren Williams should eat extremely well. So, keep him in the game, he can run you to a championship. Next up is Dak Prescott. Dak is playing the Lions at home, and if you know the Cowboys, they are extremely good at home, particularly from a fantasy perspective. The Lions are 26 versus QBs this year, and the Cowboys need a bounce-back game. They're currently riding a 2-game losing streak, and they need a win bad, and I mean extremely bad, to stay in the hunt for the NFC East Division Championship. Look for Dak Prescott to put up some big numbers this game. Here's a word from our sponsors. Question: is your NFL team winning the Super Bowl this season? If so, then you better get your new gear for the new season. NFL Shop is providing with your new favorite team's apparel this season. Use the link below or scan the QR code to see a huge inventory of NFL teams apparel. Discount codes will be available throughout the season, so use the link. Shop now. Next, we have Jalen Hurts. Now, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles don't quite look like Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, but from a fantasy perspective, Jalen Hurts is hard to stop. They have the Cardinals this week at home. The Cardinals are 28th versus quarterback, and they need to stay atop in the division as well. So they're going to throw out everything but the kitchen sink to get past the Cardinals. Jalen Hurts, big fantasy numbers. He can definitely take you to a championship. Next up is Mike Evans. Mike Evans and the Buccaneers are playing the Saints, and this is a fight for the division, first place. Mike Evans is a hot receiver, particularly in the red zone. So keep him in your game, let him leap up, let him score some touchdowns. He should get at least 1, if not 2 this game. Mike Evans is a must start to take you to the championship this week. Next, a quite intriguing matchup here, and that's with Justin Fields versus the Falcons. Justin may actually be auditioning for his new team as he plays on Sunday. Why? Because it's uncertain if the Bears will keep him as their quarterback for next season because they have an early round draft pick. And if anybody needs a player like Justin Fields, it's the Atlanta Falcons. So they will get to see him firsthand, up close, in person, what Justin Fields is about. This may be an audition game for him, so he should put up some big numbers. Check the weather report before the game, though. So if the weather report is good, put Justin Fields in the game if you haven't. Next, we're looking at Brock Purdy. Now, Brock Purdy needs a redemption game. He was dismantled, him and the 49ers, by the Ravens last week. They're playing Washington. Washington is 32nd versus the quarterbacks, dead last. But slight concern, again, is you got a West Coast team going to the East Coast to play in an early game. That means the only concern is their body clock function. So Brock Purdy's first half may not be as glorious as it could be, again, particularly because of the time difference. But by the second half, the 49ers and Brock Purdy should be clicking on all cylinders. So those fantasy numbers should be good. Brock Purdy can lead you to a fantasy championship this season. If you have him, put him in the game. As for Week 17 projections, reflecting back to Week 16, there was a 67% success rate with us. So Slightly down from the past 2 months, actually the lowest in the past 2 months, but still pretty decent. But this is the money time. Week 17 championship round, the money time. You have your studs, your duds, and your hot players. Your studs, of course, keep them in the game. Your duds, throw them out to the water, keep them on the bench. But your hot players, these are the ones that you should mix in with your studs. I know you got your studs, you played them all season, and we always teach about keeping your studs in the game. However, when you have hot players, particularly in those last 2 weeks of the playoffs, you have to put them in. Someone like James Cook, Joe Flacco, the Raiders defense, these guys are hot. And if you have them, you need to put them in the game because they may actually outweigh the fantasy points that your studs would normally get. Evaluate your team, look at who the hot players are or who the hot players may be available on waiver wire. Shouldn't be many, but there may be some out there depending on the type of league that you're in. Mix them up. Studs, hot players, they can lead you to a championship. The shootout games for this week that should produce a lot of fantasy points, that's the Cowboys versus the Lions and the Ravens versus the Dolphins. Those two games should give your skilled players some great fantasy numbers this week because the main focus is to win, and win. All of the players that we listed this week should give you good fantasy numbers. In addition to the studs you already have, in addition to some hot players that you may have, mix them all up, nice good pot of fantasy gumbo, and you have your team for the week. Again, the name of the game, win at all costs. As we always say, chess mind, poker face, win your championship. Till next time, this is Dub FFG. We'll see you soon. When you look in the mirror, do you see a GOAT? Are you the best that fantasy football has to offer? If so, then wear it on your chest. Fantasy Football GOAT Strategies has new arrivals for the new fantasy season. See the link in the description or scan the QR code. Pick up your gear now. Fantasy Football GOAT Strategies.